How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? My name is RuffledRowlit, and today we're going to be taking a look at some Pokemon rumors, leaks, and everything in between. Let's get started. First things first is going to be this post right here, ladies and gentlemen, which comes to us from Ball Guy, where somebody asked him, can we expect real-time catching in Pokemon Winds and Waves? And what do they mean by real-time catching? I'm guessing they are referring to just like you throwing the ball at the Pokemon in the open world and catching it, versus you going into a battle and then pressing the button that does it for you, right? So think about how you catch Pokemon in, I don't know, let's say Legends Arceus versus how you catch them in Pokemon, let's say Scarlet and Violet, right? So he says, somebody asked him that question. He says, you can, at one point, I heard of a mechanic of charging balls before release. Unsure if it remains. The catching system remains. Rather, I haven't heard something more on the additional Pokeball mechanics. So by charging balls, you mean about holding it for a certain time, like the smash attacks in Smash Bros? Somebody says, correct. So even if it's actually in, that'll be boosting catching odds and it'll just look cool, at least maybe bigger reach and bigger distance. But yeah, the catching system remains. So I'm a little curious how that functions, because somebody asked here, not 227, and I guess this here, meaning we'll get news earlier than Pokemon Day bookmarking. So this is old information, but he quoted this back in January and said, as in, it won't be seen until the day after the day. Apologies for a lack of transparency. Additionally, expect any reveals after Pokemon Day to go hand in hand with introductions of main story mechanics per usual. League Tour, and tier component. Then it says, can we expect real-time catching? And this is, again, bringing us back to the whole point of this post, right? His whole reply, to this, which again is the catching system remains. Rather, I haven't heard something more of the additional Pokeball mechanics. So the idea of this having, of them having some sort of charging ball mechanic, like charging up the Pokeball before you throw it, we don't know if that's still going to remain. And also, again, I don't really know, if the catching system remains implies the catching mechanic of Arceus, how you can just sneak up on a Pokemon and throw a Pokeball to catch it. Is the sneaking mechanic there or not? That's kind of what I'm confused about. I've seen a few people have their own takes about it. For example, Nintendoros here, which is a website saying, key mechanic for Pokemon Winds and Waves leak real-time free capture of Pokemon. I guess that's how they interpret it. And I've seen a few other people also interpret it that same way, that this is gonna be real-time captures rather than you having to actually wait for it, which is, fair enough. But again, it's just a matter of time until we see how it turns out. We're even seeing people like Necro Felipe, who is an insider too, and journalist, saying Winds and Waves will allow free to air cap Pokemon capture. So yeah, basically open world capture. Yeah, I don't know. Again, it's Ball Guy, and I know Ball Guy, and I know Ball Guy is great. He has a lot of information. He is an insider of sorts. He does have contacts, let's say it like that. So it makes sense if he was to go and actually learn about this information and share it with us. So yeah, that's one of the first things. The next thing though is a interesting theory of sorts coming just from Soul Server, who says, spoilery, a planned motif of Winds and Waves is survival. I don't know if this is getting this from the Terra Leak, but here's what he says though. Basically, since the box legendaries of Winds and Waves should be based on winds, storms, and waves, tsunamis, could the third legendary be based on volcanoes? Now, believe it or not, the Gen 10 is the Pokemon 30th anniversary generation, and since the box colors are blue and green, a red third legendary would complete the trifecta of the classic first games in the series. Maybe a yellow DLC later, right? Now, Southeast Asia is also part of a famous Ring of Fire, which if you guys do not know, it's these places where the tectonic plates, the plates that are, the crusts of Earth, right, that are sort of, it's where the gaps are, where the connections between them happen, right? And unfortunately for countries like Japan, they lie on the fault line, where two of these tectonic plates actually meet or intersect, which is why Japan famously has a lot, as you can see right here, a lot of tsunamis that happen, or not tsunamis, but earthquakes rather. And tsunami, back in 2011, I think the big one that happened in Japan, is commonly happens specifically because these tectonic plates, they obviously move, right? They grind against each other, and as they do this, they cause earthquakes, right? But also, when they move, sometimes the plates will readjust and pull water up, and boom, that creates a tsunami, right? So basically, the Ring of Fire is this part of the world right over here where multiple plates actually intersect. So you can see we have an intersection here next to Japan and another one down here, and also an entire tectonic set of plates, like plate that just goes like straight through these islands, which is why also I think it was back, it was like 2007 or something, I cannot remember. There's a really big tsunami also that happened in Southeast Asia, which caused irreparable damage and like a crazy amount of deaths. And as such, it is commonly known in these parts of the world that like you'll have a tendency of tsunamis, earthquakes, volcanoes as well, because you have loads of volcanoes also strewn about, which is very common. So it makes sense what he's saying, right? Basically, the most historically impactful being Ring of Fire containing hundreds of active volcanoes. The most historically impactful being Krakatoa, which had a devastating eruption that was heard as far as Africa. Such a powerful force of nature would fit it kind of perfect to base an ultimate third legendary on. Now, again, this entire game we know based on leaks and what we know from their internal documents is that they are planning this. The entire plan for this was to actually make a game where it's all about nature, right? And nature is dangerous. Nature is scary, but it's also beautiful, right? And the scary part of nature is when stuff like this happens, where we as humans, you realize how small and insignificant you are when the power of an earthquake, or even worse, a tsunami, you know, impacts, because you have no power in those situations. You lose that control. And I wonder if this game is going to at all try to go into that, because you got to remember the tsunami in Japan happened in 2011, so it's been well over a decade and a half almost now, actually a decade and a half, 15 years almost since then, and since then there hasn't been anything close to that level happening, which is, I mean, thank God. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't know how the sensitivities are on that, if they'd want to do anything, you know, related, or not related to necessarily the, you know, the disaster itself, but anything related in any sort of way, shape, or form related to natural disasters. I don't really know. I mean, again, calamities are a thing, and you can always do them in media. It's not like the end of the world. Again, Japan is famous for creating like the Godzilla, which essentially is a force of nature, if you really think about it, right? With what Godzilla does. So I don't know. It's a curious thing, but here's what his theory is, which is such a powerful force of nature would kind of fit for a third legend. There's also rumors that a gimmick is activated by a dark cloud with a lightning strike, very similar to what happens above a volcanic eruption. Also, though, I think I've heard that specific mechanic is supposed to be for raids, so I don't know if that's related, but who knows. Now, he also says, nothing like posting right when Twitter crashes. At least now I can finish my thread, so I'm going to ask once again. So he had a previous post here, which is about Mega Heat Trend, which was a weird mega they added, by the way. So I don't know. It's interesting he says it. So is this a Legends ZA Pokemon that hints to Gen 10? Which, curious that he says that, because if you really think about it, why was Mega Heatran added? Of all the megas they could have made, it's a really odd mega. But he says Pokemon leaks. Jakarta's looking so small these days, lol. By the way, leaks plus Gen I means we can truly live in the worst timeline. But yeah, basically it's an AI generated version of what the this is like the map of Gen 10, like what the map looks like, and it's just put it through an AI to see what it would look like. But that's besides the point. He does continue though and say, finally, here's the good stuff. The 2021 planned machine translated docks of winds and waves to further support a survival motif. And you can see here, this is actually stuff they said. This is real stuff directly from Game Freak of what they secretly were talking about. So they say legendary Pokemon that can be raised in a unique way. The theme is infinity, and the motif is survival. The real story begins when you obtain the Pokemon, and then the rest is blocked there. People are driven by this invisible force. Invisible force equals winds and waves, a physical phenomenon. People, nature, and Pokemon are all connected, right? People and nature and everything just connects together. And what kind of world will we leave to the next generation? Is the world we live in today really something we can entrust to the future? And the winds and the waves of each era, right? The storms and whirlpools, invisible forces shape nature, create abundance, and give birth to peace. Invisible forces destroy the environment, create pathogens, and breed conflict. The world we live in today is hardly a good one. It would be a shame if we had to leave only this kind of world to our children. So this is the concept that they're using for the basis of this. And here you can see the talk, Seth talking about the professor, which I don't know if the professor is going to be 21 or if they're going to go for an older professor, because we did see like an actual model of a professor that looked older, but again, a nature guide working at a hotel known as a survival professor. Again, a survival is a concept. He researches the relationship between weather and Pokemon. So again, a lot of connections to survival. If that's the case, I hope they will at least develop the skills to survive in this harsh world. Survival, the power to live on for the next generation. What kind of world will we leave to the next generation? And yeah, you get it. Basically, the idea of infinity, the idea of survival, the idea of, you know, humans, Pokemon, and nature coexisting. So Yeah, it's an interesting one. Also here he said, again, about the legendary specifically, what those legendaries could be. So Pokemon League theory, if the legendaries are related to powerful weather and survival, and the Wind's Storm legendary possibly is tied to Garuda, could be a flying electric type. And the Wave's Tsunami legendary Pokemon could be tied to Roro Kidul or Danaga, could be a dragon water type. Just look at this art as a concept of what that could look like. The two opposing forces, right? One for the winds and the waves, one for the storms, and one for the winds, one for the waves, one for the storm, one for the the lightning, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, again, it's theories. It's just theories. I mean, even here, he still talked about this a few days back, actually, saying, Leak theory, if the theory holds, that legendaries don't necessarily need to be humanoid. Now, the Queen of the Southern Sea is often considered a Naga or a dragon serpent related to water, so the Waves legendary could easily be a serpent. This specifically connects to Garuda, who is in eternal conflict with Naga serpents. Now, the national bird of Indonesia is the Javanese, I guess, yeah, from Java, hawk eagle, which is in the in real life eagle that represents Garuda. So the Winds legendary could easily be inspired by this eagle. Now, sadly, this is a bit on the nose, so maybe the eagle could also inspire another Gen 10 bird Pokemon, and the Winds legendary could be a different bird, a king of all birds. Either way, an eagle versus a snake as a legendary would be pretty epic, and a common symbol in many other cultures around the world. So, again, it's a matter of time if you see if this is going to develop into anything. I mean, you know, anything's possible, is all I'm saying. But, your thoughts would be appreciated. What do you guys think the connection is between, like, if they still use the survival thing, how will that function? I want to more look at it from a gameplay perspective, because lore-wise, whatever, you know, it's good to know, and I want to talk about it more, but I'm more curious about what is the long-term implication of gameplay that we can get out of this. Like, how will survival play into the gameplay? I mean, diving is always going to be a part of it, right? Like being able to traverse much better. That's a part of survival. Being able to move around, that's important to surviving. So I'm very curious to see how they're going to go about that. That's kind of my bigger question, to be real with you. That's kind of like what I'm a little bit more curious about in all honesty. But again, it's just a matter of time before we know any about this. Also, by the way, we do know from Ball Guy as well that the codename for the Winds and Waves DLC, at least that's what we think, the DLC is codenamed Zeus. And we see here Light saying it's interesting to think about the implications, especially considering that Gaia was the codename for Winds and Waves. And if Gaia represents the land and the oceans, then perhaps Zeus represents the skies and the storms. The perfect trio, the perfect balance, just kind of a harmony the Game Freak loves to create. Which, yes, they do like to do a whole, you know, bibbidi bobbidi boobity connection between everything. But yeah, it's just, you know, it is what it is. Also, if you guys didn't know, Pokopia in its first 4 days sold 2.2 million copies. I think I already mentioned this previously, but I just want to bring it up again because, I mean, it happened. I don't know what else to tell you, dog. It happened. It's a real. It's you know, it sold really well, which makes you wonder, like, will they actually make more games like Pokopia? Will they do a sequel to Pokopia? We know that there is a rumored DLC coming for Pokopia, by the way, or some kind of update. Something like, there was a DLC that was supposed to be worked on, but I don't know if that's still going to be happening because that DLC was rumored for a bit, but we don't know if it actually is going to come through. So we're going to have to wait and see if anything develops from that. Also, this was sent to me by a viewer. I'm so sorry, I don't remember who sent it to me exactly. It was in an email, and I have a ton of emails. But apparently, they were looking for new, like, R&D programmers for battle systems over, I think, at Game Freak. I think, yeah, this is Game Freak's, you know, they're looking specifically for people. I think we can refresh this to see exactly what they're looking for. So they're looking for business management, battle system junior class. So yeah, the role primarily involves designing and implementation of battle systems, parameters, and management systems alongside development of engine functions and development tools. So yeah, they're looking for somebody to do battle work, which is interesting. Also, they're looking for animation and character models. So they are looking to hire more people, which makes me wonder, is it because they lost people recently, or did they just need to make sure that they up the amount? Because they got about 50 job offerings that they're looking for, but these are all very old, so I don't really know there's much to take from this. These are very old. They could have already been filled a long time ago. But the mere fact of the matter is that they were looking for people for a while, which is good, because that means that those spots are going to be filled in, hopefully, and that also means they have more people working on these games, and not just these games, but like really anything Game Freak related. Could also be Beast of Reincarnation. If you don't know, that's like the upcoming game from Game Freak that is not Pokemon related. So there's always a chance they're working on things of that nature, but I mean, hey, I don't know, dude. Well, we'll see if anything comes from that. But yeah, also, cool little like discovery or noticed thing by Yoriden saying, interesting that the Pokopia actually uses the same whiteboard. I actually talked about this in my Pokopia video, but Pokopia uses the same whiteboard design as the one in Oak's lab, in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, but they changed the text on the board and the colors of the post-it notes. So you'll see this one is in Pokopia. You'll see we have a pink, a blue, and a yellow post-it note. But then in Pokemon, in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, we have a pink and a blue note and another pink note. Strange, right? Well, and also here you'll see again pink and a blue, but interesting. There is no yellow one. Very strange. Well, again, the theory that runs right now, at least to me, is I think this might be a reference to the fact that we're going to get a yellow Shellos, which was hinted at in Pokopia. There was a hint to a yellow Shellos. Either that's going to be a yellow Shellos that shows up in Pokopia itself, or we're going to get a yellow Shellos in Pokemon, which actually would make sense for Southeast Asia to have like a yellow slug. Would be kind of fitting, I feel like, but it's nonetheless kind of intriguing. What he says, though, is that hard to say for sure, but considering how they have continuously been putting in color combos for future games since the last Gen 6, I do believe that all of the cyan and magenta posts that's in Oak's lab, where Let's Go hints at Sword and Shield, they're the only colors he uses, which is true. As for Pokopia's whiteboard, I'm not sure, but I think it's just the primary colors, unless the yellow-blue really does secretly mean something. I personally think, okay, I still think that's yellow Shellos. I think they're hinting at yellow Shellos, and that's just me. That's just me being cray-cray. That's just me being a little cuckoo. But yeah, that's pretty much that. So again, I would love to know your thoughts, opinions on like the changed catching mechanic, or potentially keeping it rather, like the catching system remaining, which makes me wonder again, like, does that mean like we walk around and catch them in the overworld? Do we? Because I'm assuming that's what he's referring to. And again, I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions. Do you like that? Do you dislike that? Do you enjoy that? Do you hate that? Let me know, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace out, and bye-bye, ladies and gents.